You see, what I want, I first talk about South Africa. South Africa's in the news, obviously, because of the South African government's latest moves to resume land without compensation, as what they're calling it. The thing is, I'm not really talking to South Africans, black South Africans or white South Africans. I know, I've never been to South Africa. I live in Australia. I have read a bit about South Africa over the years. The thing is, the thing about South Africa is the point I'd like to make, I think needs to make about South Africa, for example, and Australia, is that what you hear about South Africa is all lies. It's all lies. You see, there's this really, amongst, say, university students and young people, all kinds of people, women and children, there's this great mass in America and Europe. There's this great mass of people who are just completely uninformed about things like South Africa. And what there is there's all these truisms circulating. And truisms based on conflations with other situations. And that's one thing. There's one thing that has to be made further. I'll go in further videos, is that the Afrikaners in South Africa, the Boer farmers, they've been lied about. They've been lied about and lied about, and they've been viciously misrepresented. The whites in South Africa have been viciously misrepresented for centuries, for economic reasons. And sure, there are some white people, especially under the British Empire. There was a lot of cruel exploitation of black labour. But sure. But see, the thing is, though, that what the things that circulate about South Africa, the accepted wisdom about South Africa amongst leftists and Marxists and universities and things, it's all lies. Now, the things you hear about South Africa are the truisms. Same as Australia. The whites killed the blacks and took their land. Sort of. And anyway, this thing about this sort of thought template that everyone understands South Africa through, because I mean all these ANC, African National Congress, Marxists from South Africa go and tell people in the Western world their story, their version of events, which is, they don't even understand the history of South Africa. The thing is, what it is the geography. You have to understand the geography of South Africa. Now, truisms like the white people, rich white people, own 90% of the land in South Africa. Okay, what do they own? The reality is, South Africa, the country, is the bottom end of the Kalahari Desert. there's different names for it. There's the Karoo, there's the Kalahari. South of that, it's called the Karoo, and west of that is the Orange Free State, and just Peter Marritt's Johannesburg and Pretoria. There's the Afrikaner republics in the middle of this arid land in the middle of South Africa, and that's the only land that the whites, Afrikaners, ended up with. The fact is, you have to understand about South Africa is it's a plateau, and there's this ring of mountains around the base of South Africa, which forms the coast, and the coastland is green and well watered, relatively green and well watered, and the interior of South Africa, all around the coast, there's some nice, pleasant, green, well-watered land, and all the rest is, the interior is a desert, a stinking hot desert, flat, arid, uninhabited. As I said, there's different names for different parts of it. There's the Karoo, which is in the southwest. There's the Kalahari, which is to the north and west. And there's the Orange Free State in the middle. And they're all desert. South Africa is a desert, and it's a giant desert the size of France. It goes for hundreds and hundreds of miles. It actually goes for a couple thousand miles across. It's 1,000 miles across, and it's a desert. It's a baking hot, flat, arid, uninhabited place where no one goes because nobody wants to. You can't live there. There's nothing there. You can't have farms. There's nothing there. There are some people there. There's a handful of Hottentots. Yeah, Bushmen. There's some, and that's it. There's no other tribes. And the interior of South Africa is basically uninhabited, except for some towns. There's a handful of towns and farms in the Orange Free State and around Johannesburg, because Johannesburg is a mining boom town. Johannesburg and those towns, they are, and the Transvaal it's called, they're mining boom towns. They are like Silver City, Nevada. If it hadn't been for the gold and silver, they would have never existed. No one would have ever thought to put a town there or ever wanted to. Johannesburg is like one of those boom towns in Western Queensland, one of those ghost towns where they built a city because they're making so much money, and the gold and the silver ran out and everybody moved away, which is basically what's going to happen to Johannesburg and Pretoria, because the gold's run out. But the thing is, the rest of South Africa, as I said, other than a bit of green arable land on the coast, there's nothing there. There's not even a town. You can go hundreds of miles and not even see a town. Well, this whole thing, you see, my point about a false accusation made against the white South Africans is that what they're doing, I mean, well, regardless of what they're like, I mean, the question is what allegations made about white South Africans are actually true. Now, what the press the Western press and what Marxists in Western University and the rest of the world do is they assume that the white South Africans are of bad character, and they go around looking for a crime to suit. Normally you have a crime, like a dead body, and the cops come in and they say, who did this? But this is pretty typical of South Africa. For whatever reason, is that the whites are accused of being a bad character, and some crime is pinned on them, which really is the rub, which is the central thing about South Africa, is that no one would care at all about the place if it wasn't for the diamonds and the gold. If it wasn't for the mining wealth, no one would ever go to South Africa, and no one would ever think about it. I mean, there was in the late 19th century, there was gold and diamonds discovered, and guess what? The British Empire decided they wanted it, and in the Second World War, they sent in an army of 500,000 people to take it off the Afrikaners and make sure they got their hands on the diamonds and the gold. In the process, they put 100,000 Dutch settlers into concentration camps and starved them to death because they didn't care. They just wanted to get their hands on the gold and the diamonds, and that's all South Africa is about. Now, you see, if you said something like, the Dutch, the white colonists went to the moon and they killed all the moon men and they took all their things and they took over the moon. Problem is, there's no one on the moon. You get a telescope, it's empty, and there's no moon men and no moon cities and no white settlers either. And you can say, well, look, the ruthless white men killed all the moon men and took all their things, and look, it's empty now. I mean, that's like saying the Afrikaners, the Dutch colonists went to Antarctica and they killed all the people, killed all, the southern Eskimos, and took all their cities and took all their possessions and took over the place, but they left. And you go to Antarctica and there isn't a single Eskimo left. And there's not a single sign of them ever being there. Because the ruthless white colonists were so efficient. You see, 90% of South Africa is basically the butt end of the Kalahari Desert. And it is stinking hot and flat and arid, and you can't live there. And no one ever goes there. And there aren't even any towns. And if you had a piece of paper that said you owned it, it's just like having a piece of paper saying you own the moon. And there's a similar thing in the minds of the people you talk to in sort of New York. You wander around New York or London and you talk to people about Australian politics and South African politics and land rights and everything. And the people you talk to in Europe and America, they've all got this, they all quack these truisms that the white people killed the blacks and took their land. See, some of them might have had a fight, But the facts are, for example, Western Australia. In Western Australia, there's a town called Kununurra, which is a railhead for some iron ore mines, and that's all there is in that part of Western Australia is some railway lines and some trains, trucks pulling iron ore from mines to the coast, and that's it. And there's Carnarvon, which is this town, which is they basically got a coastal town with a marina and a trailer park or caravan park where tourists stay, and there's some houses, and that's it. But you see, if you drive from Kununurra to Carnarvon, it's actually a 500-mile journey. And how many towns or gas stations are there between Kununurra and Carnarvon? One. It's 500 miles, and you better have spare fuel, because they charge a lot at the one service station between them. And if you had a piece of paper, say you're a billionaire and you bought that part of Western Australia, what would you own? You wouldn't own anything. You would own a desert with no roads, basically no roads. A couple dirt roads and some scrubby trees and nothing. And it's like, it's like the Karoo. The Karoo in South Africa is so huge and so forbidding and so dry. The Afrikaners, the Boer voortrekkers couldn't even get through it, for centuries, because you couldn't even get through it on a horse. And you couldn't get a horse and cart through the desert. You would die of thirst and exhaustion and exposure. Because, as I say, it's a country the size of France, which is a flat desert. There are some hills, some little hills baking, there's some mountains, like some kind of mesas that are baking in the hot sun. And there's a lot of rocky plains with some shrubs and stuff, and rocks and things. And the people who go there are usually people like government scientists or something, and they go there in a helicopter and they step out on somewhere on the desert, and they look around and go, wow, it's quiet here, there's no one around for miles, and they take a couple of photos and they get back in the helicopter and they go back to civilization. And because you can't live there and there's nothing there, and okay, there might be every couple hundred miles you find a green patch where there's some artesian water and you'll find a farmhouse and a vegetable garden and a cattle station. But that's the same in Australia. It's this giant land which is nothing but a big desert. And this idea that the whites own most of South Africa, they don't. Nobody owns it. It's a desert without any roads. There's some dirt tracks or something. It's a desert where no one lives and no one ever goes. and there's nothing around for thousands, like hundreds of miles. 1,000 miles, hundreds of miles, there's nothing. So, what do the whites own? They might own, some farms on the coast, and that's of any land, of any agricultural land that's in dispute in South Africa. That would be it. There's some farms around the Transvaal, around the Drakensberg Mountains, because they're high enough to get a bit of snow and therefore a bit more rain, a bit more water than other places. But that's all that's an issue. That's not really of any dispute, to be honest with you. I don't think there's not many people in South Africa who sit awake at night wishing they could have their piece of the Transvaal back, because all the blacks, a lot of the blacks in South Africa just moved back and moved into the towns anyway. But this brings us to the real subject, the real meaning of land ownership in South Africa is nothing more than the ownership of the land which happens to have valuable ores on it. And that's what they mean. And the government says, South African government says it's going to resume land from white owners without compensation. They're talking about mines. And they are literally, virtually talking about getting a map and drawing a circle, maybe 50 miles radius, 20 miles radius, around a valuable mine, and saying, we're taking this back. And you can have all the rest, or just you can blow out in the wind, because it's just empty anyway. Now, so that's what's really happening in South Africa, is these truisms that circulate that the whites shot the blacks and took their land. I don't know. You see, you can say, well, they were populated. And the Afrikaners tell this story about how the land was empty when they got there, and that's mostly true, because it's empty to this day. And they're just talking about the Transvaal and the Orange Free State, which is mostly empty anyway. It's just there's some Boer farmers on it who run cattle, and that's it. And that's the extent of white ownership of land in South Africa. Is most of it isn't worth anything, frankly, and the whites, the Afrikaners, only ever got the dag end of the land, and the only reason that the Zulus agreed to let them stay there was because that would put a buffer between the Zulus and the Matabele. And because the Matabele were this tribe that had grown out of the Zulu nation, and they were having a war. And the Voortrekkers just took the piece of land in the middle, and which was largely empty. Okay, and people claim, oh, they displaced the black population. Anyway, that's the whole thing.